Hey there, friend. Welcome to the Having a Mom Moment podcast. I am your host, Shannon Warner. This podcast is all about taking a few moments for yourself and reconnecting to the amazing woman behind the title of mom. You have so many plates spinning at any given time between your kids, your partner, your job, maintaining a household, etc., etc. But where does taking time just for you play into that? Let's spend some time together, you and me, right now. We're rebranding a mom moment to those sacred moments you take to fill your cup first. Let's connect, tune in, and tap into what makes us the incredible women that we are. We'll nurture ourselves first so we can be our best selves for those we pour into on a daily basis. We'll also bask in the beautiful wisdom of other moms to learn about the ways in which they've tapped into alignment in their own motherhood journeys. Come on, mama, it's your time. We're having a mom moment. Hello, my friends. If you are listening in real time, it is the day after Christmas 2023, and I hope you have had the most magical of holidays so far. And if it hasn't been magical, I understand. I've had those years too, and don't worry, next year can be a totally different story. Please excuse this nasally nonsense that you're being blessed with through your speakers right now. I have caught the cold that has been going around our home for the past month, so we're just doing the best we can right now. I'm going to spare you from this and doing more talking than necessary. So let's get right into it. This week's guest is Sage Olson. Sage is a seasoned counselor and coach specializing in helping moms navigate self-care, boundaries, and finding their identity beyond motherhood. With years of experience in counseling and a passion for empowering moms, Sage's passion is guiding moms to reclaim their identity and embrace a fulfilling life. Here's Sage. Hey, Sage, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I love talking about these things. So,
Me too. I'm excited you're here. So can you give us a little preview about who you are and what you do?
yeah, so my name is Sage Olson. I'm a therapist. So I started out as a school counselor for a while. I got my master's of education, was a school counselor, and then from there I wanted to make a shift and do a little bit more counseling. And so I got my master's of social work, and I've been a therapist for, going on 6 years now. Um, So I was a therapist. I worked in trauma and addictions for a while. Got kind of burned out with those because, as you can imagine, it's kind of heavy, kind of intense, dealing with those things a lot. And
Sure.
so when it was actually right at the beginning of the pandemic, me and my husband decided that would be a great time to move to a new state and start new jobs.
Hmm.
um, so we started, and I left the treatment center that I was working at, and I started, um, everything was remote and there was a high demand for therapists. And so I partnered with this company, and I just started accepting all sorts of clients from all over. And I love that because it allowed me to kind of get a feel for who my favorite clients were and what I liked
Mm.
working with. And each day after work, my husband like, "Oh, how was your day?" And I would always be like, "Oh, I'm so excited. I worked on this and this and this," obviously not giving him details because confidentiality, and he actually pointed out, he's like, "Your favorite clients, like the ones you get most excited about, are when you're talking about women that you've helped set boundaries and being people pleasers." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, those are my favorite clients to work with." And then I was telling my sister that. My sister's like, "Well, yeah, because that's like those are your people. That's
Mm.
you, Sage. Like that's why you like those." And I was like, "Oh, that's fair." So so yeah, I kind of found my niche there, and I loved it and kind of honed in on that. And then I became a mom, and then I realized that all of those things that I preached to my clients were were absolutely necessary. And they also required a lot more effort and a lot more creativity. Like self-care required a lot more creative thinking and a lot more planning as a mom. And
Mm-hmm.
boundaries became absolutely essential. They weren't just like, "Oh, it's nice to have." It's like, no, I need to have boundaries.
Yeah.
Um, So it was this kind of shift for me. And so I feel like over time I've been able to kind of combine my expertise from my therapy and my education and my background with my personal experience of being a mom. And that's kind of where that's kind of how I got here, just my own personal journey and personal realization of practicing these things. So yeah, so now I work with moms, helping them find their identity within motherhood by setting boundaries, stopping people pleasing, and practicing authentic self-care. So
Hmm. There's a lot of good stuff to unpack in there. But first, can we
yeah.
dig into your own personal motherhood journey? I love especially how it's kind of come full circle and it's
Mm.
really driven home what you're doing now. But what was your experience like?
Oh, so yes, all the things. Um, First, one of the things that I remember like learning about mom guilt, right? Everyone talked about mom guilt. I had worked with several of my clients beforehand about it, and for some reason I had this like really naive notion of like, okay, well, now that I know what it is and I know to like watch out for it, I just won't do that.
Right.
Like, I had this like super naive thing of like, well, I'm a therapist and I teach my clients about this stuff all the time, so like I should just be able to carry that over into motherhood.
Hmm.
Easy, like shouldn't be that hard. Bless my heart. Um, so
Yeah.
so it was like a, I don't want to say a rude awakening, but shocking, I guess, of trying like experiencing that mom guilt firsthand over like every little thing. And that struggle, that identity crisis that I feel like a lot of new moms go through, where I feel like I lost myself and suddenly my whole life revolved around being a mom. Every time anyone asked me any questions, it was always about my kid.
Mm.
Um, and I started
Yeah.
to realize, like, um, for me, the first realization of that and the first struggle was when I went to go. My daughter was like 6 weeks old, and I drove to visit family, and it was their first time seeing her. And they all came and they sat in a room and they all gushed over her and they're like, oh, she's so cute. And they were there for like a couple of hours and then they left. And my brother, he was there at the house, but he wasn't really involved in the conversation. He was just kind of in and out. And he came and he's like, oh, are they gone? I was like, yeah. And he's like, how? He's like, oh, so did they just come to see, they just came to see the baby? And I was like, yeah, they just came to visit us. And he like looked at me and he's like, did they come to visit you or did they come to see the baby? Because none of them really talked to you.
Mm.
And for perspective, this is my brother who is on the spectrum.
Oh,
He has
interesting.
autism. So for him to pick up on those social cues was
Wow.
like wild to me. Also, so he's like really blunt sometimes. So for him to, when he's just like, no one really talked to you, I was like, ouch.
Wow.
But it totally hit me, and I started to realize I was like, yeah, actually, they all just kind of gushed over my baby,
Wow.
and none of them asked me like, hey, Sage, you're like 7 weeks postpartum. How are you doing? How is labor? How's being a mom? Like, and that just kind of like hit me in the face, and I've reevaluated those relationships since then, and I'm not going to get into that, but it but it totally hit me and made me, and it felt really isolating, and felt really lonely. And so I started to realize like these relationships, like how many people actually ask me about me and how I'm
Mm.
doing, and how many people are just they just want to play with like the new baby. And
Hmm.
I feel like so many people treated my daughter as like, oh, she's just like a new little dolly. We're just gonna come and play with her, and then like they just left, and like that was the extent of their support. Um, but on the flip side of that, I also realized a lot of my meaningful relationships. I also realized that I had support system of people who really were there to support me and were truly there to help me, not just because they wanted to the novelty of a new baby, you know?
Right.
So it totally was this like, and I'm just scratching the surface. Like, oh my gosh, I feel like anyone can relate when you become a new mom. Like, there's so many emotions.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go for a whole episode on the mom guilt I had surrounding breastfeeding and formula
Oh
and
my God.
all that
Yeah.
ridiculous stuff.
Yeah.
But it just that that shift, and I just remember being like, okay, so is this it? Is this my life now?
Mm.
Like, I'm just my daughter's mom.
Oh my gosh.
That's it, you know? And so it's totally sparked this journey of like, okay. And I had to come to a realization of like, no one is going to fix this but me. No one is going to come to my rescue. I'm going to have to be the one to advocate for myself, and I'm going to have to be the one to make very intentional changes to
Yeah.
change this. Because honestly, at that point, I was the only one that was really aware that it was happening, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And then my brother randomly, I was like, really?
Wow.
You
Yeah.
picked up on that of all people?
Wow.
So, so
Mm.
yeah, just kind of, I don't know, just kind of crazy. And so that identity crisis when that new moms have is it's so real, and it's one of those things that's hard to explain, and it's hard
Mm-hmm.
to describe to people until they've been through it themselves, you know?
Right. Oh yeah. I love that your brother said that. And I love, that you kind of explain to people who may not realize, like, if they're on the spectrum and they're picking up on these social cues, like they are very obvious. And
Yeah.
what a
Yeah.
gift though. I'm sure it was like, whoa, like you said, like a slap in the face, but like what a gift that he saw something so obvious and was like, yo, here's my observation of the situation. That's not cool.
Hmm.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and it was so funny because I don't even think he realized that he was just like, in his mind, he's like, I'm just pointing out the obvious. Like,
Yeah.
you do realize no one actually talked to you. And I was
Ugh,
like, oof. It's like,
wow.
ouch.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the realization that hit home for me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna need to reevaluate some relationships and friendships here. And
Yeah.
that added on to that whole identity crisis of like, I had to find a whole new tribe, a whole new community, a whole new
Mm,
group of people. And so I feel like me, myself, like personally, I was trying to figure out my personality and my likes and dislikes and who I was as a mom. And then on top of that, I was also having to go through this like this this community shift where it was
yeah.
like this relationship inventory where I was like having to you realize that some relationships that kind of run their course, and then I
Mm,
finding new ones, and it's painful. It's painful, but I will say focusing on what focusing on what you're gaining too. I lost I've lost a lot of relationships that I realized were more surface level, but on the flip side, I've also gained a community of really genuine and meaningful friendships. That's
mm,
that's really powerful, and I would much rather have a small group of quality relationships and genuine relationships than a big group of surface level people that are just there for, again, I feel like so much of it was like they just wanted the novelty of a new baby,
mm-hmm,
and there's like, oh, your daughter's so cute, and then that was it,
mm.
you know?
Yeah, there's a lot I want to unpack here. I think first is like culturally here in America, how we treat new moms is messed up. The more I learn
Yes.
about the
Oh my
way
gosh.
other countries and societies treat postpartum women, it's like, okay. And that's just how they're just
Hmm.
perpetuating the pattern of like, oh, we'll go see the new baby. And they're not even thinking about you. Because if it's either been a long time since they've had a baby or they've never had a baby themselves, they don't understand the gravity of the situation. They think you're just like, yeah, come on over, come hold the baby, and I'll just sit in the background while everyone ignores me. That's fine. I might be wrong, but I think in Korea, like women stay at their parents' house for like 40 days after they have a baby and like lay in bed, and everyone just like takes care of them and make sure the baby's also taken care of. And I'm like,
Why?
I know the more you
That's
start to learn,
amazing.
I know the more you start to learn about the way other cultures treat their moms, it's like, ooh, we Yeah, it's no wonder,
Mm,
because here we're just like, we'll see you at 6 weeks after, for your checkup. Maybe you're going back to work at 6 weeks. Everything is back to normal, life as usual, just get back to your normal level of productivity. And like nobody
hmm.
honors the space around, having a baby.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. It's kind of like the novelty of it has worn off for everyone else, and they just move on with their lives.
Yeah.
Like I felt like so many people were so excited to come see the baby when she was born, and they wanted to hold her and like, oh, cute little dolly to hold.
Yeah.
But then like the novelty kind of wore off for them and they just moved on with their lives. And I was like, I'm still here,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
And I
know,
need support now more than
still
ever,
here.
because the people have stopped
Yeah.
coming around because they think, oh, I'm in it like 8 weeks, 12 weeks. I've totally got this figured out and I know what I'm doing now. Wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like I said, it was really lonely to start to realize where those relationships ended.
Yeah.
And but since then I have an amazing community of people. Like even just so 2 days ago, I needed a last minute babysitter in the evenings just for 1 hour while I had a session with a client. Things fell through. It was last minute, and I texted my friend. I was like, "Hey, I know it's super last minute. Could you come over from 5 to 6?" This is how amazing she is. She's like, well, I have a consult with a client at that time, with like a new client at that time, but like I could totally reschedule it. I can like
Oh,
it wouldn't be hard for me to reschedule this client. Like I can totally come over. And I was just like,
oh
no,
my
don't
gosh.
reschedule your client. But I was like gonna cry that she was just like, I will be
So
there. I totally
willing.
get it. All
Mm.
and and I was like, no, don't reschedule your client. That's important. And I was able to find someone else. But like just the fact that she's like, dude, it's not a big deal. Like it would not be hard for me to reschedule this client. Like I can totally come. And I was just like, no, like thank you so much. You're amazing for that. But it
Hmm.
just hit me like the contrast of friends like that versus friends that are like, yeah, as soon as there's not like a cute baby involved, I'm not interested anymore.
Yeah.
Or like as
Hmm.
soon as your kid gets into like the toddler stage and
Oh,
starts throwing tantrums, they're
yeah.
not super cute anymore, and I'm not
Right.
interested. You know?
Right. Right. Yeah, I think there's something to the stage too when you can still like bring them in a carrier and they're contained. Like, yeah, I can meet you for dinner. The baby will sleep through dinner. They're usually, pretty cooperative with the whole
Yeah.
experience, but like it's a new level when they become mobile and louder, and they're not as like
Hmm.
welcome in, those kinds of environments. Yeah. Mm.
Yes. Oh, very much so.
Can we dig more into the relationship inventory that you touched on and what that looks like? And how might someone realize that it may be time for one of those in their own lives?
Yeah, and I think the idea of relationships and setting boundaries lately has kind of become, how do I phrase this? It's one of those things like on TikTok, it's kind of become like a trending thing. Like
Yeah.
people are like, go no contact, that person's toxic.
Mm,
And people are so quick to throw around the word toxic
yeah.
and are just like, you need to cut them out. Or like TikTok or like Reddit when people do like the am I the asshole things on Reddit
Yeah.
and they like give like a 2 paragraph blurb of like me and my husband got in this fight and everyone's just like divorce him, he's the worst, he's toxic. Like
You're so right.
every like everyone is like, okay, whoa, let's calm down. It doesn't always need to be this extreme. Like,
Yeah.
also, we don't need to like assign the label toxic to like every single thing. It's okay. So I do feel like some people misconstrue that. So when I say like a relationship inventory, they immediately go to like, ooh, toxic friends, cutting people out of your life. And there definitely are times when that's necessary, but it doesn't need to be that harsh.
Hmm.
So when I talk with my clients about this relationship inventory, um, one, it's talking about what relationships add to your life and which ones take away. One of my supervisors gave me this analogy of it's a relationship bank account, deposits and withdrawals. And he said when you first meet someone, like you need to build a relationship and they need to have a lot of deposits into your account. So when they do ask you for favors, when they do ask you for things, there's something there to withdraw from.
Yeah.
So, for instance, this friend that I just gave the example that, like, when I did ask her, like, hey, I'm so sorry last minute, can you babysit? I have put a lot of time investing in that relationship, and I've also helped her a lot, and I've deposited a lot into her relationship bank account, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I needed help and I needed a favor, she was willing to, like, yeah, I'll be there because
Mm.
it was a mutual reciprocal thing. So thinking trying to think of it like that, of what relationships leave you just feeling drained,
Mm.
where they just the only time they talk to you is when they need something.
Yeah.
That's a cue of like, oh, I haven't talked to you in a few weeks, and suddenly you text me out of the blue and it's because you need something from me.
Mm-hmm.
And coming to terms with and just accepting those relationships for what they are.
Mm.
Um, and with that, it's you don't always need to have like this big conversation and like this big falling out with people.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just let them do what they're gonna do. And so I'll tell my clients, like, match their effort.
That's good.
So if this friend hasn't called you in 4 weeks and they haven't talked with you and the only time they call you is when they need something, just match their effort. Don't feel the need to try to engage them in your life or keep them included because they've shown by their actions that they're not really interested in that.
Yeah. Mm.
And this is a really hard exercise because it involves getting real, basically, and taking like a very realistic look at some of these relationships. And it's really hard when these relationships are your family
Mm.
or your close friends. And you start to realize, like, this isn't as reciprocal as I thought. Um, so again, it doesn't need to be this whole like falling out or this big dramatic thing where you like cut them off and like I'm blocking you or whatever. Just let them do what they're going to do and match their level of effort. And honestly, a lot of those relationships just kind of take care of themselves.
Yeah.
Um, just yeah, don't put in more effort than they're showing. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense?
Absolutely. And as a mom, like you don't have the extra effort to dispense, all willy-nilly in relationships that are not being,
Hmm.
reciprocated like that. That's really good advice. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think we need to give ourselves more permission to do that.
Yeah, and I always worry when I tell people this because sometimes it gets twisted into like, what, so we're just not supposed to talk to anyone? Like we don't talk to people unless they talk to us? And it's like, no, no, no. Like you still should make an effort and put effort into relationships. Like one of my best friends just called me last night. She texted me and was like, "Hey, do you have time to talk this week?" We talked for like 2 hours,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I would do anything for her. And it's because that relationship is reciprocated. I know that she
Yeah.
would also take the time. I mean, we can go 3 or 4 weeks where life is just busy and we don't talk, but then
Right.
she'll check in, hey, sorry, life's been busy. How are you doing? Can we have that time to catch up? So I am more than willing, and I'm going to put effort and work into that relationship. I'm going to put work and effort into the relationship of the friend I just told you that was willing to reschedule her client to come watch my kid. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how awesome is that? And those for sure put effort and make effort for those relationships. What I'm saying is you need to have a realistic look at what relationships are uneven and
Yeah.
realizing that it's okay to just let some things go
Yeah.
and so let some things just run its course, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know it can be hard too when someone's been in your life for a long time. It's like, oh, they've been present for so much, but it's like that doesn't mean that you have to hang on to it either.
Yeah, yeah, and it's always a lot more complicated too when we're talking about like family. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I had a client a couple of days ago actually that she was like, yeah, I'm starting to realize that anytime I call my mom to vent, she ends up just making it about her.
Mm-hmm.
And she just ends up talking about herself all the time. You know, and it was a really emotional session where she's like, I'm having to come to terms with the fact that I'm losing that part of my relationship with my mom, that
Mm-hmm.
she's no longer someone that I can just call and vent to because I end up leaving the phone call feeling more drained and
Mm,
frustrated than when I called.
right.
That's and that's also a cue, something to look out for is those relationships where after talking with them or spending time with them, if you feel like you leave and end up feeling more drained and more exhausted than when you got there, that's a red flag. That's something
Yeah.
to notice and to look out
Mm-hmm.
for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I know with family it gets tricky, but you still have the option of boundaries with those relationships, right? You don't have to go full
Hmm.
tilt, cut them off, they're toxic, never talk to them again, but you can still find a relatively healthy balance and a space to
Yeah.
cooperate in with some boundaries. What does that look like?
Oh, that's like the messy area, right?
Mm,
And it's so complicated and it's so unique to each person. So like with this example with this client, she's like, you know what? I realized with my mom, I can't call and vent to her about things, but she is a great grandma and my
mm,
kids love her.
yeah,
She's like, so I'm setting the boundary and I'm choosing that like I'm not going to talk about with her about these things, but she can come over and we'll make time to go out of our way to spend time with grandma. And so deciding what parts of those relationships and you might need to be selective about what
yeah,
time and what energy you invest in there and and so it doesn't need to be this all inclusive like this all or nothing mentality. You do I feel like you do run into this with especially with family. There's this mentality of like, well, they're family,
mm-hmm,
so like they're like so many of my clients like, yeah, but like they'll list like all these like really manipulative or abusive things. And I'll be like, well, why do you allow this? And like, well, I know, but like they're family.
mm,
And I always push back against that because I'm like, listen, being family or sharing DNA with someone doesn't give someone free reign, doesn't give them a free pass to treat you like garbage.
right,
And I hate this mentality of like, oh, well, they're family because like if your neighbor treated you like with this client, I was like, if your neighbor did that to you, would you like make an effort to go talk to him? No. If your
right,
coworker did that to you, guess what? You wouldn't talk to that coworker. If any of your friends did that to you, right? So it's like when you get to a point where your neighbors and coworkers treat you better and treat you with more respect than your family,
right,
that's sad, right?
right.
It's like because they're family, they should know better.
Mm,
Because they're family, they should be held to a higher standard. Like my family shouldn't like again, my coworkers, neighbors shouldn't treat me better than my family does. That's so backwards.
right.
And I feel like we need to make sure that like you're allowed to hold family members accountable for their actions.
Mm,
Again, I'm not saying it always needs to be some dramatic like no contact, cut them out of your life thing. That also doesn't mean you're not allowed to set boundaries with them and you're not allowed to hold them to those boundaries and call them out on things.
I love that because I feel like if we start doing it, I'm always thinking about like what cycles we're breaking for our own kids that they don't have to carry forward. And if we show them what healthy boundaries look like and healthy relationships, especially in the family dynamic where it can get really tricky for all the reasons you just stated, but you show them like, no, this is what it healthy
Mm-hmm.
looks like for us. And then they can see that and internalize it instead of carrying forward, like I have to do this because it's family and this is just what we do in this family. So important.
Yeah. Yeah, like think about it. You're modeling for your kids what healthy boundaries looks like.
Yeah.
And that's very important. Like
Yeah.
happy moms raise happy kids.
Yeah.
And those and kids pick up on everything you do.
They do.
everything.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm like kind of worried sometimes.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there are times when like I'm like, oh my gosh, like ugh, like me and my husband, we call each other a butthead all the time. It's so funny and it's ridiculous, but it's like a term of endearment. Like if he says something sarcastic, I'm like, whatever, you're such a
Yeah.
butthead. And we started saying it as a way of like it's a nicer way than calling them an asshole, but also it's like kind of funny.
Yeah.
But now I'm worried because I'm like, our toddler is gonna start going around calling everyone a butthead. And my husband thinks it's hilarious, and he's like, I'm totally okay with her calling people. I'm like, no, but kids pick up on everything.
Yeah.
And so if you start to normalize setting those healthy boundaries and you start to normalize sticking up for yourself, they're going to grow up thinking that's normal. Everyone
Yeah.
does that. They're not going to grow up thinking that this is like a new skill they have to learn or something they
Right.
had to put effort into. It's just going to be part of their life. Like, how cool
Yeah.
is that?
So cool. So powerful if they
Yeah.
just show up, into adulthood with this skill set already in place. Mm,
Yeah. Right? I
yeah.
wish. Oh my gosh. That'd be
Yeah.
great.
Instead of trying to like scramble and learn it once we're like moms and overwhelmed and drowning in all of the responsibilities of our lives. Yeah.
Or even like the fact of like they're not going to feel guilty
Yeah.
setting these boundaries because it's going to be normalized for them. What a
Yeah.
gift. Like, what a gift to give to your kids.
Mm,
Like, if, like, the amount of time I spend with my clients working through the guilt that comes up
yeah.
and setting like reasonable boundaries, like very reasonable things that people, for whatever reason, have an issue with.
Yeah.
And just working through that guilt of like, you're not a bad person for wanting to take care of yourself and your family. That is huge to like raise a generation that doesn't have that guilt. That'd
Yeah.
be amazing.
Right? Mm, I know there's a piece of this that pulls in the whole people pleasing piece. I know this is an area you can talk to, and I discovered the people pleasing part of me like once I had a kid, and I was like, I'm exhausted. I've got too many plates spinning in the air. Like something's got to fall. I can't maintain all of it. And a lot of the things I was carrying were not mine to carry because I was so invested in people pleasing. So,
Hmm.
what can you tell moms? I know some of us don't even realize we're doing it, but what advice,
Yeah.
what feedback can you offer?
So people pleasing. So I feel like it's such a struggle for moms because it's kind of seen as like a rite of passage of like, well, if you're not overwhelmed and you're not burned out, then you probably aren't doing it right. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
this, it totally is seen as this rite of passage. Like, think about it. When you like, how many times have you vented to someone else like, oh my gosh, I'm just so tired, like I'm exhausted, and their response is like, well, wait till you have two kids if you think one
Hmm.
is exhausting, or like, oh, just wait till they start potty training,
Yeah.
or oh, wait till they're teenagers. Like, it's always just like, nope, just wait, it gets worse. Or when when you're pregnant and everyone's like, get all the sleep you can now.
Mm,
Take advantage of all the Sunday naps you can now because you will never have a life again. Like, it's so ridiculous. Or I had people that were like, go on a baby moon, go on lots of vacations, travel while you can, because like when you have kids, your life is over. And
mm,
it's so ridiculous. I hate that narrative, but it is
hmm.
very much like, well, once you have kids, everything stops and you will never be able to do anything ever again. It's just, so it's so I feel like that's why people pleasing and that like martyr mode is
Mm,
so prevalent in motherhood because it's just pushes like this is just what it is. Um, and I feel like rather than like pushing against it, sometimes we as moms have a tendency to just like adopt it as a core part of our identity,
yeah.
and we like take pride in it of like,
Mm,
and we like brag about how overwhelmed and how burned out we are,
yeah. I
and we
can
like
think of a
see it
few.
as a badge of honor,
Yeah.
right? like, I feel like all of us have fallen into this trap at one time, and, like, you almost see it as, like, a badge of honor, and when you're, like, talking to other moms, it's like, "Well, I'm more tired than you.
Right?
I'm more overwhelmed. You think you're overwhelmed, wait till you listen to what I've had to
Oh
do."
my
You know what I
God.
mean?
Yeah, we're all losing, by the
Tell
way.
me. Yeah, I was like, "Please tell me it's not just me." Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I've totally found myself in this cycle. And so with that people pleasing, it's so people pleasing comes at the root of it. So much of it comes from the fact that we're worried that we're going to lose relationships,
Hmm.
or we're worried that we're not enough if we're not helping. There, I don't know if you've seen Encanto. If you're like my house and it was like on repeat for weeks. My kid went through an Encanto phase.
Yep.
But uh, Louisa, her song, when she sang the song about under pressure, I can't remember the name of the song, but there's a line in the song where she says, "I'm pretty sure I'm worthless if I can't be of service."
Mm,
And I remember listening to that. I was like, oof, that hurts, because that, for so many of the women and moms I work with, that's the core part of the people pleasing, is we have this idea that we're worthless if we're not serving.
mm,
And so if we're not helping people and we're not doing stuff, then we're going to lose relationships, and people are going to stop talking to us, and we're not worth anything, right? It hits
yeah.
home. Like, when I first heard that,
Yeah.
I was like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
how sad is that?"
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a journey for me in realizing like I'm worthy because I'm here. I showed up today. I woke up
Mhm.
this morning. I'm worthy automatically. I don't have to do a thing. And it's really hard to come to that realization when we're so like output driven and like productivity oriented and all the things. And our value a lot in a lot of scenarios is based on how much we get done or how much we bring home or what we bring to the table. And just reframing like the understanding that you don't have to prove your worth. And if you do have to prove your worth to somebody, they're not somebody worth your energy, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Yes. And it's like your sole purpose on this earth is not to just like help and serve everyone.
Right.
Like, that's not your whole purpose and your whole identity.
Right.
And so there's that piece of it. But another piece that I found with mom, when we start to unpack the people pleasing, is a lot of them will use it as a way to cope with their own anxiety or their own overwhelm,
Mm,
because they have this idea of, okay, if I can keep myself busy and I'm just going and helping others, then I don't have to stop and think about my own life and what's going on with me.
oh,
And I can use that as an excuse of like, well, I don't have time for me. I don't have time to do all of this stuff because I've got all these other people. And no one's going to question you on that, because everyone's like, yeah, that's a good thing.
right. So
Help other
noble.
people. Yeah, oh my gosh, like, you're so noble and so
Oh,
generous. So I've seen that as so many moms of like, and I'll ask them like, what are you avoiding?
mm,
What are you trying to not feel by constantly going?
yeah. Oh my gosh. What is some of the response? I mean, obviously, without going into too much detail and confidentiality
Yeah.
and everything, but like, what are some of the themes you're seeing in the responses when you ask women that?
Yeah, it's crazy because these, when we get to that point, a lot of them have the same reaction that you just did of like, oof, and it just kind of hits them.
Yeah.
And it requires a lot, like they have to do a lot of self-reflection. And a lot of it is, we uncover a lot of insecurities, but there's a lot of deep insecurity there that they don't want to address, or
Hmm.
insecurities there that if they're not, that they themselves are worthless if they're not helping other people. Um, sometimes they're uncovering the fact that when they have to realize that they're not fully happy in their life, and they're overwhelmed and they're not happy, and they genuinely don't know what to do about that. And so
Yeah.
instead of trying to have to sit down and think about that, they just, right, they just help other people and keep reaching out.
Yeah.
And that's that's one of the hardest parts, is when we start to break down the people pleasing, is like clients have to get to a point where they're willing to admit that they're not happy.
Mm.
And like admitting that and coming to that realization of like, I'm scared to slow down, because once I slow down, I have to admit that I'm not happy. And I have to admit that something is wrong. And that scares the hell out of me, because I don't know how to fix this. And
Mm.
I feel very out of control here.
Mm.
So once you come to that realization, it's it's like a double-edged sword. It can be very depressing and very disheartening.
Sure.
And then, but then I always try to flip it with my clients of like, this is also really empowering
Yeah.
for you to say that out loud,
Right.
because this is the first step where you can start to take that power back. Of like,
Mm.
if you're not happy and something needs to change, let's talk about what we can change. You
Yeah.
know, because nothing changes if nothing changes.
Right. Right.
Right? I'll say that to my clients and they always look at me, but then they think about it for a minute and I'm like, listen, it's going to require some serious effort and some changes on your part.
Yeah.
Like, we can't, sometimes we get stuck in this mode where we're just running, 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 and we realize we're not happy and we're overwhelmed, but then we're not willing to like make an effort to change anything. And so we just kind of sit in this like frustration and this bitterness of like, oh, well, it's just my life now, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. But it doesn't have to be your life. That doesn't have to be your story, especially once you've come to the awareness, like,
Mhm.
wow, what power to, shift just 2 degrees and see where the new direction can take you. Mm.
Yeah, and it's hard though, because I find for a lot of clients, sometimes when we have adopted that as a core part of our identity,
Mm.
when we've like have that badge of honor of like, well, I'm an exhausted, burned out mom. This is just who I am, like mom life or like wine life or whatever
Yeah.
like hashtag I feel like we've popularized. They're like hot mess mom. Like,
Yeah.
why? Why do we need to
Right.
whatever trendy hashtag we've made up to like
Oh my God.
normalize moms being burned out, right?
Oh my gosh.
Um, and so so many of my clients, they've adopted this as a core part of their identity. So the idea of not being that is kind of scary,
Sure.
because they're like, well, then what am I? Like, we're having to
Mm.
completely refigure their identity
Yeah.
and rediscover who they are and rework that. And that's scary, because then they go through a whole other identity crisis of like, well, am I going to lose friends now? Am am I going to start to lose some of my mom friends when I start to, when rather than accepting this narrative that I'm just burned out and tired and bitter all the time? And I start to put myself first. I start to advocate for myself. I start to practice self-care. Am I going to start to lose some of my friends?
Hmm.
And the sad part is probably,
Yeah.
right? When you, because, and again, like we said before, this is when you're going to have to do another relationship inventory.
Yeah.
And you're going to start to realize, when you have those friends where you're talking about something you're excited about and they're like, oh, it must be nice, you know,
Yeah.
those like
Yeah.
passive aggressive comments.
Yeah.
Those friends
Yeah.
are like, wow, I wish I had time for that. Wow, I wish I could do that, rather than just being genuinely happy for you.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's also a very scary part of embarking on this journey of like embracing being happy and like actually enjoying your life, because
Right.
you're going to get kickback from miserable people, because misery loves company.
Yep.
And you're going to have to be okay that some relationships you just outgrow
Yeah.
and you're going to move on.
Yeah. and allow yourself, like with these relationships, some of them are just there for a season. I have people I don't talk to
Yeah.
anymore, but I can look back and go, wow, they were such a blessing to me in this phase of life. I so needed them. And then we went our separate ways and we're all okay. We all live to tell about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Like normalizing too that some relationships really are just there for a season
Mm-hmm.
and you just drifted apart and there's no animosity there. There's no reason. I look back at some of my friends from college that we've just drifted apart
Yeah.
and we haven't talked in 10 plus years.
Yeah.
Or some of my old roommates or some of my old coworkers that we were really good friends and we're coworkers, but I got a new job and it's just a different season and we just drifted apart. And like
Right.
that's totally fine too. That's very normal and very healthy.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like we get this idea of like we want life to be like a sitcom
Yeah.
where we like all live across the hall from our best friends and we all go to a coffee shop and talk.
Right.
That's
Right.
but that's not always reality and that's totally fine and that's healthy.
Yeah. I think I want that sometimes. And I'm like, I'm too tired to do like, where's that energy going to come from? Like I don't have time to go meet somebody for coffee right now. I have all these other, of course I could make the time, but it's like when you really think about like, is that actually what you
Yeah.
want and have the space for in your life right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or,
Hmm.
or you think about like I have had that at times in my life, but then I moved on.
Right.
Those were friends that were there for a season
Yeah.
and we moved on and we're in different stages now.
Yeah.
And that's
Oh,
that's a whole other that's a whole other conversation of just like
yeah.
sometimes like grieving that loss of those relationships or
Yeah.
looking back with that nostalgia and being like, oh, I miss that.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah. It is hard. But I've seen in my own experience, whether I let go of physical items or friendships, it opens up space for other things to come in. And even if it is
Mm.
hard, I went through like a really deep Facebook friend cleanse over the summer. I was like, I've been out of high school almost 20 years. We weren't really even close in high school. So I really don't need to know what's going on in your life.
Yeah.
Wish you well, and then I ended up in this other community of women, and my Facebook friend list has kind of been flooded with these really empowered, inspiring women. I'm like, yeah, that's who stuff I want to see in my news feed, not this guy that I literally haven't talked to since 2004. Like, I'm good. Nothing but the best friend, but
Right?
yeah. Yeah.
Right? No, that is so true. I saw a meme and it made me laugh because it's so true. It's like, hey friend that I met on a dinner cruise once 6 years ago, let's be Facebook friends and I'll keep in touch with your kids. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I saw that
I
too.
was laughing because I have friends. I legit had to have Facebook friends that I like met on a cruise like 10 years
So
ago.
funny.
And we're
So
still Facebook
funny.
friends. And it's to the point where there's been a few times where it shows up on my feed and I have to like look at them like, who are these people that are on my feed? Because they'll like post a
Yeah.
picture of like their kids or something. And then I'm like, oh, that's Taylor from that Royal Caribbean cruise we went on in like 2012. Like, and then I'm
It's
like,
so funny.
maybe maybe it's time to cleanse this. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
crazy how social media has changed that. Because before social media, you just have a friend and like I remember being a kid like going on vacations and you just have like your vacation friend that
Yeah.
you like meet and then you just never see them again. But now it's like no, we're Facebook friends.
For
And I
life.
like have a I yeah, like I have a front row seat to like your kids and all your drama
Right.
that
I
like
saw
I
you
don't even
wasted,
recognize.
almost passed out. But yeah, now I'm going to sit and look at pictures of your kid's first communion because, that's where we are in life. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah, for real.
So
I know.
funny.
I'm like, okay, I have a rule where if I don't immediately recognize this person and I have to stop and think like, wait, who is this person on my feed? I should probably just unfriend them.
Yeah. Oh, I used to have a habit
Just move
of
on.
like going to the bar, meeting some random people, getting into really deep philosophical conversations and being like, let's be Facebook friends, and like, I don't remember these people the next day, much less 7, 8, 10 years later over Facebook. It's
Oh,
funny.
I have friends that I like met at like people that you like meet at a concert or something, and you're like BFFs for that concert, and
Yeah.
then you never see them again.
Oh my gosh.
But
No,
I'm
that's
Facebook friends with them.
so funny. Yeah, I
Oh,
totally feel that. That so resonates. Yeah. My husband and I recently were Pearl Jam fans, and we saw them 2 nights in a row in Chicago and went over, drove from where we are to Chicago and stood in the merch lines because the merch sells out. It's a whole thing. It's a part of the,
mhm.
the Pearl Jam fan concert experience, standing in the merch lines. And both days we met these really interesting people. And we're like, wow, because you're standing in this line for hours, and you just really
Yeah,
start to like unpack stuff with people. And it's like, wow, that's really interesting. I know a lot about you. And then you go up to the merch line and then you like wave and you're like, never see you again, Just next.
yeah,
I know way too much about you, but it's just so funny. We did not make any Facebook friends on this trip, but it's just like, it's so funny the way we just like collect people and then feel like we have to like carry them in our pocket with us forever.
yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh,
Mm.
we did a girls' trip down to Vegas and went to a Backstreet Boys concert.
Oh my God.
It was amazing. I regret
Goals.
nothing. People judge us, but we
No,
were like living out our like teenage
that sounds
dreams. Like
amazing.
we were just fangirling at this
Oh my God.
Backstreet Boys concert.
I
I
love it.
loved it. And afterwards, we took the Uber ride back to our hotel, and the Uber driver was just like, I don't drink, but I do drink a lot of caffeine. And at this point,
Oh.
I had had like so much Diet Coke, and I was just like hyped up, and I guarantee he totally thought I was drunk. Um, but I was just like, "Oh my gosh, what's up, dude?" Like, and we started talking. We're like, "We just went to Backstreet Boys. Do you remember Backstreet Boys?" And he's like, "Yeah." And we like reminisced about middle school. It was the most
So
wild
fun.
Uber ride. This guy 1000% thought I was drunk. But I remember earlier that morning we get on, and he like added us as a friend on Facebook. Like, I don't even know how he found us.
Oh
And
my gosh.
I didn't accept his friend request because I was
You drew
like,
the
okay, that's
line.
weird. I don't know. Yeah, I was like, boundaries,
Yeah.
dude. But it was like so wild. Like I think about that guy. I don't even remember his name, but I'm like, wherever you are in life, I
Oh my
hope you're
God.
doing okay.
Right?
I hope you're
Oh,
living your best life, man.
yeah. Boundary. Draw the line. We stop at Uber drivers. Apparently, that is the boundary.
We
It's
stopped at
so
like
funny.
random. I remember he like gave us a business card and he's like, I'm a songwriter. And like, here's my songs. You should look me up on Spotify. And we're like, hell yeah, let's go. Let's look you up on Spotify. And then like I woke up, I was like, oh my gosh.
I love it.
Yeah. Speaking of
Oh,
boundaries, that was
yeah.
a fun little tangent we went on.
Oh my gosh. No,
Speaking
I
of
love
relationship
it.
inventory and sorting through your friendships.
Yeah. So, take this opportunity, find some time today, look through your friend list. And if you're like, I have no clue who that person is, let them go, set them free, you know?
Seriously.
Oh my gosh.
Seriously.
This has been really fun, but I have a couple questions I like to ask everybody. You've given a lot
Okay.
of solid, sound advice here because of the nature of the work that you do. But if you could give one piece of advice to another mother at any stage in motherhood, what would it be?
Just one. Hold on. Let's see.
No, no pressure.
One, so one thing I know, I'm like, I have all the things.
Yeah.
One piece of advice I would give to another mom, I would say find ways to incorporate humor and just laugh at yourself and
Yeah.
laugh about things. I had a podcast interview with someone, and she brought up, she's like, "Kate, if you're having an argument with your partner, or sometimes it's okay to just take a step back and realize how ridiculous you're being in that moment and just laugh about it." I've tried to apply that to like this week. I don't know, guys, but I was just like mad. I was
Hmm.
so mad. I had no logical reason to be mad. I was just like ornery. I was pissed off
Yeah.
and I just wanted to like throat punch someone. And again, I had no reason to be
My
like,
favorite term.
I had no reason to be upset. And I was aware that I was being irrational. So like Monday night, my husband comes home and he can tell, he's like, "Hey, you're a little snappy," but he's so patient. And he was like, "Okay," and just like gave me my space.
Yeah.
And then Tuesday, I was still just like mad. And finally, I just like took a step back, and he was home for lunch on Tuesday, and I just laughed and was like, I'm sorry I'm being such a butthead this week. He just like looked at me, and I was like, I'm sorry. I know I'm being like irrationally upset right now, but like I just want to throat punch someone. And then he just laughed about it, and he's like, yeah, I was wondering, you're kind of tense this week, like, and then we laughed about it, and even that like just broke
Mm,
that tension,
yeah.
and so I've always tried to, like, when my toddler's having a tantrum, my daughter's going through this super fun stage where she doesn't like getting buckled in her car seat. So
Joy.
anytime I go anywhere, she like arches her back, can't get her buckled in. So I'm like sitting in the freaking grocery store parking lot trying to load my groceries, trying to get her to buckle in. And I just stopped and I'm like, I must look ridiculous to anyone walking past. I've like got Bluey on my phone. I'm trying to like entertain her with Bluey to
Yeah.
keep her distraction enough to get her buckled in the
Oh
car
my
seat.
gosh.
Also, my freaking shopping cart's rolling away. I'm trying to like
Oh
keep the
no.
shopping cart from hitting another car. And my kid, like, I'm just having a full on like wrestling match with my feral child right now. And I just had to take a step back, laugh for a minute, because I'm like, people probably think, like, I look ridiculous. I look like an unhinged mom. Like, this is hilarious. And it just allowed me to take that step back and just, okay, not take it so
Mm,
seriously.
yeah.
She was able to calm down. So just find time, just find time to laugh at these things
Yeah.
and try to make an effort to like just laugh and not don't always take yourself so seriously. Life's already hard enough.
Right, right. And a lot of it won't matter in an hour. That's such good advice. I love that. I've not gotten that advice before when I've
Yeah.
asked that question. So I love that. So how do you reconnect to yourself in motherhood on top of momming and working and balancing the career? What do you do to reconnect to Sage?
So this is like a new thing that me and my husband have been working on the last couple weeks that I absolutely love. So I found myself stuck in this cycle where I would want to have like hobbies or interests or like explore new things, but then I would never have time. But then like my husband would have hobbies. He like collects hobbies. And then I would get frustrated at him for having hobbies.
Mm,
But like because I didn't have it was like this weird thing where he would like ask me and be like, "Hey, are you okay? Give me plenty of time in advance." And then it would come time and I'd be like, ah. And so I got stuck in cycles. So finally I was like, "Okay, we need to change something." So we figured one of the biggest struggles is just I wasn't communicating that I wanted that time. And I was just like
hmm.
expecting him to know, like, okay, when you come home this evening, this is when I want time, and I'm going to be mad at you if you just don't know that.
Yeah.
So I have been very intentional about scheduling that time.
Mm,
And so we have a shared Apple calendar now on our iPhones, and we will schedule those times in. So
good.
like if I have an evening where I'm like, hey, I want when you get home from work this evening, I want to take this 1 or 2 hours to go do whatever. I'll put that on the calendar, and then he knows, okay, I'm not going to schedule anything with friends or whatever because I know that like this is her time to go do it, so this is my time to be dad.
Yeah.
Or if I know he has a work meeting or something, I'm not going to schedule times. Like that just made such a big difference is
Mm,
like putting that on the calendar, and rather than having the mentality of like, oh, well, when I have time, I'll do it. It's like,
yeah.
no, I made it a very intentional appointment, and I scheduled that, and I'm communicating that with my husband so he can help support me in that as well. And we're working together rather than me just expecting him to read my mind and then getting frustrated that he's not. That's been a huge thing for us the last couple weeks.
I love that. I love how you said like schedule it like an appointment. Like you're not going to miss your appointments. You're not going to miss your children's appointments. Your husband's not going to miss their appointment. Schedule it the
Yes,
same way. Yeah, give it the same weight because it deserves it.
carve out that time. Carve out that time for that and treat it just like you would any other appointment.
Oh,
Because
that's really
no one
good.
else is. If you don't do it, no one else is going to
Exactly.
do that for you.
Exactly. You're exactly right. This has been so fun. It has been just chock full of advice. Lots of little things that we can start implementing, I think. So where can people find you? How can they work with you? Tell us all the things.
So, sageolsoncoaching.com. That's OLSON. I've got a blog on there. I also have my own podcast. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter to me. Um, and yeah, those are probably the two biggest places to find me.
Mm-hmm. And you've got an upcoming community that you currently have a wait list open for?
Yes, we're starting a group in January. I'm so excited. It's going to be a 12-week group of new moms talking about all of this, talking about boundaries, like there's 3 different boundary types, there's 6 different kinds of boundaries.
Mm,
Uncovering all of that, we're going to do a deep dive into people pleasing, where that comes from, how to deal with that guilt that comes from it. We're going to talk about finding your identity, taking some of these steps to find your identity outside of motherhood. The biggest thing I'm excited for is that we're just building a community of
yeah.
moms, because we spent a lot of time on this episode talking about how isolating it can be. And sometimes you have to find a new community and do that relationship inventory.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to start this group because I want to start building those communities and feel like moms have their tribe, have their
Yeah.
people. That's starting in January on my website. There's a wait list on my website, just right there under, I think it's Work With Me on the homepage.
Yeah.
so
Awesome.
so yeah, check it out.
And as someone who is very active in online communities, and we moved to this area a couple years ago, so my friend group in this area is very small, but like I have such a beautiful community of people that I would have never met otherwise. And I talk to them, some of them just as much as I would have talked to my local friends, you know? So there's so much power in the
Mm-hmm.
online space. So don't be like, oh, but it's online. Like, no, there's so much beauty in that online community space.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I have so many friends and connections from moms that I've met even just through podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, I'm like, we should all just plan a big cruise because there's so many of these ladies I want to meet in person.
Same. I totally feel that. This has been so fun, Sage. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom. And we'll make sure that everyone can find you. All those links will be in the show notes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me and letting me ramble and share about my
Yes.
Backstreet Boys concert in Vegas. I'm like embarrassed. I'm like, I totally just went on a side on a tangent there. I think we're
We
good though.
we love a tangent. We love a tangent over here. So thanks again, Sage. Thanks again, Sage. If you're interested in joining her community, it is still open. It begins in January. And again, those links will be available for you in the show notes. While you're in the show notes, check out my couple of freebies for expecting moms, my 18-page maternity leave planning guide, as well as my How to Fund Your Unpaid Leave workshop. If you're not expecting, but you know someone who is, please spread the love. I just want to help as many mamas as possible. Mat Leave Social is coming in January. If you're about to have a maternity leave in the new year, please check that out. If you're looking for additional free resources, check out my Instagram, and I'm also dabbling in TikTok. If you haven't already, please subscribe and rate the podcast. It helps drive the algorithm so we can continue to spread the beautiful message to all the mamas out there. And again, please excuse this cold, but I must remind you, in case someone else has told you, you are amazing, you are loved, and I am so proud of you. Have a beautiful day.